Dear friends, welcome to the Eastern Front channel, and today we will dive into the memories of the Soviet defenders who served in the Arctic front. As you know, it was a hard conditions, terrible weather, polar night and at least very cold. In the end of this video, I will show you interesting photo. On these photos, it seems that time has stopped. An august weapon carrying the eternal service. How they survived, what they did to trick the enemy and protect strategically important territory. According to the Directive number 21 of the Wehrmacht, better known as the Barbarossa Plan, the capture of Murmansk and the entire Kola Peninsula was one of the priority tasks for the German command. For its implementation, the Army Norway was created, staffed by German and Finnish soldiers, who underwent special training for operation in the far north. As a result, there was the only sector of the Soviet-German front where the enemy troops were stopped already several tens of kilometers from the line of the Soviet state border. In some places, the Germans were not even able to cross the border. I took part in battles with Germans in the Arctic, and I saw the running soldier. During the machine gun fire, he fell. After the German plane gained altitude again and went for another circle, he jumped up and continued to approach the rocks. The plane once again rushed down, a burst sounded and the soldier fell. Everyone thought he was dead. The plane began to move away and the soldier, to our surprise, got up, shook his fist in the direction of the German and headed towards us. He turned out to be a scout from the 6th battery of our regiment. He realized that the German would finish him off anyway, decided to outwit and pretend to be dead. Soon I used this technique myself. In October, I returned to the front line on the lookout point from the defensive line. I began to climb the ridge of the hill. A bullet whistled nearby. A fountain of stone deposits splashed. I fell on the stones, and when I began to rise, the bullet passed beside me again. The sniper fired, but here it was difficult to hide. I fell as if I was killed by a bullet, lay motionless for 10 minutes. Then I jumped up abruptly, quickly passed several meters and disappeared behind the ridge of the hill. The belated shot went into stone. The Henkel bombers began to attack the battery, which occupied a stronghold at Cape Vaitalahti. They hunted our submarines and surface ships. In the absence of targets, they unloaded their deadly cargo onto the gun battery. It had no anti-aircraft weapons. Small arms fire was useless. The Germans felt their impunity. Many times I thought about how to resist the Germans so that they don't drop bombs on our heads, but I couldn't find a solution. Once, being in the firing position of an artillery platoon of 76mm cannons, during a smoke break, I started a conversation with the soldiers about the rates of the German Henkels. They immediately suggested using a cannon for firing at planes. One of the fighters said, "Just give me the axe." He proposed to cut down from the wood movable gun carriage. The flat cart wheel allowed to turn the cannon and shoot. There was a lot of wood on the bank. A large amount of wood, once lost while rafting on rivers, caught in this sea and washed up on the shore. It's indeed one of the main attributes of the northern seas, from huge decks that cannot be wrapped in your hands to small twigs. Also, we have a lot of shrapnel in stock. I reacted with some distrust to such proposal, but the device was ready in 3 days. The view was strange, but the cannon was rotated in a horizontal plane for all 360 degrees. The elevation angle was less than 80 degrees. You can shoot at air targets. I calculated the installation of the shrapnel tube. The gun crew mastered how to aim at an air target, established communication of the gun with the command post. The next day the weather was clear and sunny. The distant noise of engines was heard. The Germans appeared. They began to go to the battery, so I ordered them to open fire. 3 shells exploded not far from the lead aircraft. The Germans steeply left the course, dropping their cargo anywhere. The Germans didn't appear over the battery again. They decided that we have anti-aircraft battery. Tricks of military cunning were constantly occurring. They arose spontaneously. One day the division supported the battalion's advance on the hill. The artillery crews suppressed the mortar battery of Germans. The enemy opened return artillery fire on the battery. In that case, I have to give orders to get cover for soldiers. But from another side, if the battery stops firing, the Germans will conclude that they hit the target and increase mortar fire. If we continue to fire, the Germans will decide that they are shooting at an empty spot, stop firing, change settings, and move fire to a different location. I ordered the fire to increase. Everything was justified. The Germans changed their firing settings. The explosions followed much to the right and far from the battery. I ordered the fire to stop. The battalion supported by us completed the task at that time. There was a freedom of action. Our battery stopped firing. The Germans interpreted it as covering the target, intensified the fire, hollowing deserted hill for a long time. They fired about 200 shells. The polar night was coming to an end, and soon German reconnaissance planes would be hanging over us. The enemy showed an increased interest in the location of the battalion. We decided to arrange false positions in the rear of the main firing positions and camouflage our real position more carefully. Gun trenches were made from snow. We installed mock-ups, put on camouflage nets. Cellars for shells and dugouts were made of snow. We installed stoves that smoke with pipes outside. We have trodden paths to guns and dugouts. During the night, the fighters settled in false positions. They did everything right. Peat smoldered in the stoves, a cheerful smoke was steaming. In the main positions everything was disguised, there was no movement. In the afternoon, a Henschel, as we call it crutch, appeared over the Sredny Peninsula, made several circles and flew away. An hour later, 24 bombers flew in, began to bomb false position. Our trick worked. The next day we began to create a false position in another place. The Germans constantly bombed our false positions, fired at them from guns. We combined false position and pneumatic batteries, giving the enemy an exaggerated idea of our numbers. We misled the enemy about the location of our artillery. A captured German artillery officer taken prisoner in 1942 said, "If we rely on our intelligence from aircraft, light and sound reconnaissance, ground observations, then there were always more than 50 batteries in positions against our artillery brigade." As we see from these cases, not only the power of guns matter, but also human ingenuity helps a lot on the battlefield. By the way, you could also see one interesting video on why Soviet soldiers put buckets on the tank barrel. It was also one of the military tricks. That's all for today. Share in comments about which military tricks you heard. I think it would be interesting to read. It was Team and Eastern Front channel. Wish you peace and health. See you.